Hey, how's it going, everyone? We are live. And this is Unlearn, new series called About Unlearning Against Learning. This is episode 3, February 17th, 2021. And the topic is what really happened at the Jesuit reductions and why it matters. All right, so this is a 3D rendition of the San Ignacio mission that was in Paraguay in the late 1600s, early 1700s. Now it's just ruins. So as you can see the Jesuits here. Got the Jesuit monogram, Sigil of Mary, IXXI, Azazel, 9/11. Yeah. So you just go through and you can see what it looked like. Here we have all the buildings where the people lived in, and then the church, the graveyard, etc., etc. Yeah. You can see them working in the fields. Okay. And then, just more pictures. Get you an idea of what it looked like. And this wasn't the only one. There were several, many, dozens of these types of things. This is what it looks like today. This one specifically. But we also have ones like, where is it? We also have ones like the Jesus de Tabarangue. And here, I'll put it up. Right there. So as you can see, this one's also ruins, but this was also one of the reductions. Okay. Right. So I think you get the picture. Right. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. Good morning, everyone. Going to be talking about the Jesuit Guarani, reductions of Paraguay, Argentina, and Bolivia. So it's not just Paraguay. It's Argentina, Bolivia, etc., etc. I'm just going to bring up a little window capture of this. And then we're just going to make sure it's... I don't know why I didn't have this in. All right. We're just going to stretch it to the screen. All right, here we go. Let's get into it. So we're just going to give you a brief rundown. This is such a big topic, such a massive topic. It's not specifically about modern communism, Soviet Union, China, all that stuff. It's to get you an idea of what it actually is and where it comes from. All right. So once you know the origins and what it actually means and what it looks like, you can understand whatever it is they would like to do, what they want to do. Okay. So we're first going to be reading from not these, but the PDF of Richard W. Thompson's The Footprints of the Jesuits, 1894. Okay, chapter 10, in Paraguay. So we're not going to read it all, but we're going to start on page 169 here. Okay. Or yeah, 169. So it says this. It says, the missionaries were taken mainly from the ancient monastic orders, the Dominicans, Franciscans, etc., and had been regarded by the popes for many years as not only the most faithful but the most efficient coadjutors of the church in the work of extending Christianity, Catholicism over the world. We have elsewhere seen that the Jesuits did not sympathize with this belief, and that Loyola had urged upon the Pope the necessity of creating his new society upon the express ground that these ancient orders had become both inefficient and corrupt. When the New World therefore was about to be opened before them, the followers of Loyola endeavored to seize the occasion to supplant the monkish orders if possible, and to take into their own hands exclusively the dissemination of Christian influences among the native populations. In this respect, the Jesuits displayed more zeal for their own success than for that of the church, and made the cause of Catholicism secondary to their own interests. The history of their missions in South America will abundantly show this, as it will also display their insatiable ambition and unparalleled superciliousness. The first Jesuits were sent to South America by the King of Portugal. They found a large district of country washed by the waters of Rio de la Plata and its tributaries, which had not been reached by either the Spaniards or the Portuguese, but remained in the exclusive possession of the Indians, who had never felt the influence of European civilization. The natives generally had been treated by the invaders with extreme cruelty, having been often reduced to slavery and forced to submit to a variety of oppressions and indignities. All the resources of the country susceptible of being converted into the wealth were seized upon to supply the royal treasuries of the Catholic kings who tyrannized over them. The whole history of that period shows that unless some counteracting influences had been introduced, those who professed to desire the civilization of the natives would, in all probability, have added to the degradation and misery in which they were found when first discovered. The Jesuits desired to apply some corrective, and there is no reason why the sincerity of their first missionaries in this respect should be suspected. So, government, evil. The Jesuits come to the rescue. Think about it today. Okay? And you'll see what happens. It cannot be justly charged against them that they were disposed to treat the native populations with cruelty, or to do otherwise than subject them to the influences of the Jesuit system of education and government, the Ratio Studiorum and the constitutions. Whatsoever faults of management are properly attributable to them, and there are many, are easily traceable to that system itself, which from its very nature has always been and must continue to be inflexible, concrete, inasmuch as blind and uninquiring obedience to the superior is the most prominent and fundamental principle of the society. Everything in either government or religion or morals must bend to that or break. There is no halfway ground, no compromise, nothing but obedience. Everything is reduced to a common level, leaving individuals without the least sense of personal responsibility except to those in authority above them. Now look at today. For these reasons, it is necessary to remember, whilst examining the course and influences of the Jesuits in Paraguay, that whatsoever transpired was in obedience to the command of the superior general in Rome, who held no personal intercourse with the natives, and whose animating and controlling purpose was to grasp the entire dominion over the New World in his own hands. It was chargeable to the constitution and organization of the society which, as already explained, so emphatically embodies the principle of absolute monarchism as to place it necessarily in as to place it necessarily in antagonism with every form of liberal and popular government. If the government they established in Paraguay and maintained for 150 years had not been monarchical, it could not have had Jesuit paternity or approval. If from any cause at any period of its existence it had become otherwise by the introduction of popular features, it would have encountered Jesuit resistance. Monarchism and Jesuitism are twin sisters. Popular liberty and Jesuitism cannot exist in unity. The former may tolerate the latter, but the latter cannot be reconciled without exterminating everything but itself. Whatsoever institutions existed, therefore, in Paraguay, whilst the country was under the exclusive dominion of the Jesuits, must be held to have been in precise conformity to the Jesuit constitution and of such a character as the society would yet establish wheresoever they possessed the power either to frame new institutions or to charge existing ones. The Jesuit idea of exclusiveness and superiority influenced the conduct of their missionaries in Paraguay as elsewhere. But for this, different results might have ensued. If they had been content to recognize the monastic orders as equally important and meritorious as their own in the field of missionary labor, and the ancient machinery of the church as retaining its capacity for effectiveness in spreading Catholicism throughout the world, if, in other words, they had been content to recognize any merit as existing elsewhere than among themselves, the natives might have been subjected to a very different destiny from that which in the end overwhelmed them. But they were not permitted by the nature and character of their order to entertain any such feelings or to cherish any ideas of success other than those which promise to inure to their own advancement. Accordingly, we find them, as explained by one of the modern defenders of high celebrity, basing their claim to exclusive jurisdiction over the natives of Paraguay upon the express ground that the ecclesiastical influences sent out under the auspices of the church and the patronage of the Spanish and Portuguese kings had become injurious rather than beneficial to the natives in consequence of the most flagrant corruption. In explanation of one pursued by the Jesuit missionaries, he says, quote, "One of the first experiences of the missionaries was that it was in vain to hope for any permanent fruit among the Indians unless they were separated from the evil influences of the Europeans, the white man, who swarmed into the New World carrying with them all the vices of the old, and adding to them the licentiousness and cruelty which the freedom of a new country and the hopes of speedy riches bring them." End quote. This same author also speaks of, quote, "the hordes of adventurers who flocked over to the New World, the scum of the great cities of Europe," end quote, in order to show that by intercourse with them, the natives knew, quote, "little more of the Christian name than the vices of those who professed it," end quote. Think about today, people. To let it be known that, quote, "lay adventurers," end quote, are not alone referred to, he mentions expressly the, quote, "worldly and ambitious ecclesiastics and religions," end quote, who were, quote, "forgetful of the spirit of their calling or apostates from their rule," end quote. He casts a variety of aspersions upon the characters of the bishops of Assumption and of Buenos Aires, who the archbishop of that Cadiz was Jesuit Pope Francis, and maintains the proposition with earnestness that if the Indians were allowed to have unrestrained intercourse with the Spaniards, quote, "they would derive the worst consequences from their bad example, which is entirely opposed to the principles of morality," end quote. So, in this, the Jesuits displayed their wonderful astuteness, and it may be supposed that they employed these and other kindred allegations with effect in Spain, inasmuch as they succeeded in obtaining from the king a special, quote, "prohibition for Europeans to set foot in," quote, "Paraguay." So they used this as a way for no one to be allowed in Paraguay but the Jesuits, so that they could thereby secure exclusive control of the natives and bring them under Jesuit influences alone, independent of the monastic orders and the ecclesiastical authorities of the church. This was a great stroke of policy upon their part because by ignoring the church, its ecclesiastics and the monastic orders, they were enabled to assume prerogatives of the most extravagant character and to hold themselves out to the natives as the only Europeans worthy of obedience and the only true representatives of Christian civilization. Not only, therefore, in the manner of securing the royal approval of their exclusive pretensions, but in the character of the government established by them, did they exhibit their chief characteristics of ambition, vanity, and superciliousness. Characteristics they have never lost. The government established by them in Paraguay was essentially monarchical. It could not have been otherwise under the principles of their constitution. Under the false name of a Christian republic, it was, to all intents, a theocratic state, so constructed as to free it from all European influences except such as emanated from their superior at Rome. All the intercourse they had with the church and the Pope was through him. And whatsoever commands he gave were uninquiringly obeyed by them, without stopping to investigate or concerning themselves in the least to know whether the church and the Pope approved or disapproved them. In order to impress the natives with the idea of their independence and of their superiority over the monastic orders and the church ecclesiastics, they practiced the most artful means, black magic, to persuade them to hold no intercourse with either Spaniards or Portuguese, upon the ground that they could not do so without encountering the example of their vices and immoralities. The unsuspecting Indians were easily seduced by acts of kindness, and the result was that, in the course of a brief period, they succeeded in establishing a number of what were called reductions, or, more properly speaking, villages, with multitudes of Indians assembled about them, the whole aggregating in the end several 100,000. These constituted the Jesuit state and were all, by the mere ceremony of baptism, brought under Jesuit dominion. At each reduction, the natives were allowed to select a secular magistracy with limited and unimportant powers over such temporal affairs as could be entrusted to them without impairing the theocratic feature of the government, which is English for the Latin words governamento, which means mind control. But in order to provide against the possibility of permitting even those few temporal affairs from being conducted independently of them, they adopted the precaution of providing that before any important decisions were carried out into effect, they should obtain their sanction as quote-unquote spiritual shepherds. There never was anywhere a more thorough and complete blending of church and state together. Although this new state was established under the pretense that it was necessary to protect the natives against the bad influences of the Spaniards and the Portuguese, the approval of it by the King of Spain, Philip III, was obtained by the promise that, quote, every adult must pay him the tribute of $1, end quote, a consideration of chief importance with him. Philip IV was equally disposed to favor the Jesuits, presumably for the want of proper intelligence. For it would have required but little investigation at that time to have discovered that the only motive of the Jesuits was securing royal approbation in Europe, was that they might ultimately acquire power to plot against European royalty itself when it should stand in the way of their ambition. Think about today, think about your country. To show how little obedience was paid to the public authorities of either Spain or Portugal, it is only necessary to observe that the reduction was governed by a Jesuit father, supported by a vicar and a curate as assistants, but whose chief duty was espionage. This governing father was under the orders of a superior who presided over a diocese of 5 or 6 parishes, the supervision and management of the whole being lodged in the hands of a provincial who, quote, received his orders direct from the general in Rome, end quote. If therefore the kings of Spain and Portugal supposed that the Jesuits in Portugal intended to pay fidelity to them, or to either of them, they were deceived, as, in the course of events, they discovered. They obeyed their general in Rome and him alone. The praise ought not to be withheld from the Jesuits, that the natives who were thus brought under the influences were better and more kindly treated than those who were compelled to submit to the dominion of Spaniards and Portuguese beyond the limits of Paraguay. They, quote, partook of their labors and their amusements, of their joys, of their sorrows. They visited daily every house in which lay a sick person, whom they served as the kindest nurse, and to whom they seemed to be ministering genii, which is a demonic entity, right? The genii of, the jinn, the genii of Arabian Gnosticism, Manichaeism, By these and other kindnesses, they brought the Indians to look upon them with a feeling bordering upon idolatry, as well as Sabianism. Okay, so by these and other kindnesses, they brought the Indians to look upon them with a feeling bordering upon idolatry. They worshipped them. They thought they were gods. But whilst they were friends, they were also sovereigns. And, quote, governed with absolute and unquestioned authority, end quote. This was a necessary and indispensable part of their system of government, which embodied the Jesuit idea of a Christian republic. It was in everything pertaining to the management of public affairs and absolute monarchy, with all its powers centered in a general at Rome, whose authority was accepted as equal to that of God, and to whose command obedience was exacted from all. Apart from this governing authority, universal equality prevailed. The principles of socialism and communism, very much as now understood, governed all the reductions. There is no China without this. There is no slavery in America without this. You think the slaves in America, the white and black, there was white slaves too. Black people enslaving white people, black people enslaving black people, white people enslaving black people, white people enslaving white people. People selling their own family members into slavery in America. It was a slave trade of everyone and everything. You think that was bad? I've read the history. I've read the books. It's nothing compared to this. It's nothing. And I'm not making any light work of what happened in America. But you must understand, it's all based on this. Everything necessary to the material comfort and prosperity of the Indians was in common. You get everything just like everyone else. You get paid the same, you get dressed the same, you get the same portions, you get the same everything. You have no identity, no individuality, no personality. Everyone is the same. Everyone is a clone. Okay? Each family had a portion of land set apart for cultivation. They also learned trades, as many of them, both men and women, became experts. But the earnings of the whole were deposited in common storehouses at each reduction, and distributed by the Jesuits in such portions to each individual as necessity required. Quote, even meat was portioned from the public slaughterhouses in the same way, end quote. The surplus produced remaining after these distributions was sent to Europe and sold or exchanged for wares and merchandise, solely at the discretion of the Jesuits. Everything was conducted in obedience to them, and nothing contrary to their orders was tolerated. Rigid rules of conduct and hours of labor were prescribed, and the violators of them were subject to corporal punishment. Houses of worship, colleges, and palatial residence for the Jesuit fathers were built by the common labor and at the expense of the common treasury. Suffrage was universal. It was Catholic. But, quote, the sanction of the Jesuits was necessary to the validity of the election, end quote. In fact, says Giovanni B. Niccolini, the great historian of the Jesuits, quote, the Jesuits substituted themselves for the state or community, end quote. A fact which fully establishes the monarchical and theocratic character of the government. In order to teach and let me just stop right there. Boycott Amazon, the greatest electronic Guarani Jesuit reduction, where everyone gets paid the same, and you can't even go to the bathroom to take a piss or go to the washroom to go poo, because if you do, you'll get fired and you have nowhere else to go. You're hanging on a line. People piss themselves working at these places. It's a commune. Boycott Amazon. Jeff Bezos' dad was a Jesuit. And we fucking talked about it on The Greatest Electronic Commune, How to Escape It. Just search a team brief. Go look it. Go watch it. All right. In order to teach the confining Indians that obedience to authority was the chiefest duty, they were subjected to rules of conduct and intercourse, which were enforced with the strictest severity. They were watched in everything, the searching eyes of the Jesuits being continually upon them. They constituted, in fact, a state of society reaching the Jesuit ideal completely. That is docile, tractable, submissive, obedient, without the least resemblance of a manhood. Sound like today? Where are the men? Where are the men of Israel? Where are the men of Yasharel? Where are the king priests? Where are the soldiers? Stand up, Luther. Rise up, and you shall have your match. The sons of Loyola are at your door. They're in your living room. They're in your bed. Your children are being slaughtered. Get up. Man up. Let's go. Having thus completed their subjugation, energetic measures were adopted to render any charge in their condition impossible. For this purpose, care was taken to exclude all other than Jesuit influences and to sow the seeds of disaffection towards everything European. Right? Everyone hates everyone. No, you go outside the door, you're guilty until proven innocent. No trust, no love. Everyone hates everyone. They're all Satan. They're all running to and fro. Hasatan. That's what it means. Yeah? False accusing. The false accuser of the brethren. The object being to surround them with the high wall of ignorance and superstition. Superstition, guys. Which no European influence could overleap, and within which their authority would be unbounded. How much superstition is going on right now? Washing your hands, putting on a mask, quarantining. Oh, I'm scared. If I do this, maybe I'll have good fortune and luck. Idolatry, fornication of the whore, of Mary poison. Okay? Superstition. Everyone's universal. Everyone's Catholic. No one's set apart. They all look the same. They all act the same. They all think the same. They were instructed that the Spaniards and the Portuguese were their enemies, that the ecclesiastics and the monkish missionaries sent over by the church were unworthy of obedience or imitation, and that the only true religion was that which emanated from their society and had their approval. Now, what would that be today? That would be the TV, the media, the social media, everything. Everything, right? And you think they knew, the Indians? You think they knew this was another Catholic society that came from all the other monkish societies and that they were the Jesuits? They had no idea. They had no idea who these were. They would have thought they were just like celebrities, just like today. People worshiping the Jesuits and they don't know because they never know. They'll never know. So it's just like this. Okay? If these simple-minded, and if these simple-minded people were taught anything about the church, it was with the view of convincing them that the Jesuits represented all its power, authority, and virtue, and that whatsoever did not conform to their teachings was sinful and heretical. If they were told anything about the Pope, it was to represent him as an inferior to their general, who was to be regarded by them as the only infallible representative of God upon earth. That all the other ideas should be excluded from their minds. That they were not permitted to hold any intercourse whatsoever with Europeans, for fear undoubtedly that they might hear that there was a church at Rome and a pope higher than their general. Like on pen and paper, he's supposed to be, right? But you can go read Pope Paul III's Charter of the Jesuits. Gives all the power over to the general. So they were not allowed to speak any language but their own, so as to render it impossible to acquire any ideas or opinions except such as could be expressed by means of its limited number of inexpressive words. Inexpressive words. Guys, stop. People don't speak English anymore. They speak in emojis, Twitch language, memes. You know what I mean? It's hieroglyphics. You're speaking with no communication, no emotion, no nuance, no situational anything. It's all just debased. It's this. It's another language. It's alien. It's foreign. It's demonic. It's not from this world. They were not allowed to speak in any language but their own, so as to render it impossible to acquire any ideas or opinions except such as could be expressed by means of its limited number of inexpressive words, that is, to keep them entirely and exclusively under Jesuit influences. To sum up the whole, without further detail, the Indians were regarded as minors under guardianship. We're all just a bunch of little children, and we're all just being taken care of by the clowns, right? By the pedophiles. And in this condition, they remained for 150 years without the possibility of social and national development. Canada. You know, Canada's just over 150 years. It's a long time, guys. It's a long time. There's countries that have even been around for more than 60 years, you know? So, they were saved, it is true, from the miseries of Portuguese slavery, but kept in such a condition of inferiority and vassalage, the vassal, right? This is all going back to serfdom and admiralty maritime law, banking, feudalism, right? And vassalage as unfitted them for independent citizenship. Independent citizenship, right, guys? Do you think you have an independent citizenship when you wear a mask just like everyone else? No. Their limbs were unchained, but their minds were, quote, cabined, cribbed, confined, end quote, within bounds too narrow for matured thought, sentiment, or reason. It would not be fair to say that the Jesuit missionaries to Paraguay may not have been animated by the desire to improve the condition of the Indians or to withhold from them the meed of praise justly due for the humanity of their motives. It is undoubtedly true, as already intimated, that they did shield them from many of the cruelties to which they had been subjected under the Spanish and Portuguese adventurers. Now, who taught the Spanish and Portuguese adventurers who overran large portions of South America in search after wealth? Who told them to go and do that? The Pope. No, I'm not even joking. That's what he said. And Pope Alexander VI in 1490, I believe, put out the papal bull for the king and queens of Spain and Portugal to go to the New World, and he split the world in two, and he said, you can go and enslave all of them, not with ancient slavery, but with domestic slavery, and you can do whatever you want to them, and everything there is yours in the name of the Pope. Okay? So what do you think the Jesuits did? They said, look at these evil people. Now come to us, right? So people need to stop blaming governments and the Jesuits, and they need to stop blaming themselves. Start blaming yourself. Start blaming your sins. Repent. Stop being immature. It's not about the government or the evil societies or the Jesuits or the Pope. They're only here because of us, guys. Only here because of you and me. All right. So, but it cannot be too indelibly impressed upon our minds in this age that they acted in strict obedience to the Jesuit system, which permitted no departure from absolute monarchism and centered all the duties of citizenship in obedience to themselves as the sole representatives of the only authority that was or could be legitimate. And not only did their strict adherence to their system make it necessary for them to hold the Indians in subjugation and treat them as inferior subjects, but it involved them, at last, in collisions with the Spaniards and Portuguese and obliged them to treat the latter especially as enemies and to impress this fact upon the minds of the whole Indian population. The consequence of this was to create an independent and rebellious government within the Portuguese dominions, which necessarily brought the Jesuits in conflict with the legitimate authority of the Portuguese government. This is so key, guys. The Jesuits foresaw this and prepared for it. It is a fair inference from all the contemporaneous facts that they desired it. This is what they wanted. At all events, they subjected the Indians at the reductions to military training and discipline. Everyone has a militant mind. They've made the whole youth militant. They're making them Jesuits. At all events, they subjected the Indians at the reductions to military training and discipline so as to be prepared for such emergencies as might arise out of their relations with both the Spaniards and the Portuguese. One would suppose that in a government so far separated from the rest of the world, governed by those who profess to be laboring alone for, quote, the greater glory of God, right? Ad maiorem de gloriam. Ad maiorem de Pfizer. The arts of peace would be chiefly, if not exclusively, cultivated. But the successors of the first Jesuit missionaries thought otherwise. Consequently, besides refusing to allow the Indians any intercourse with the Europeans, they would not permit them even to leave the reductions. You're not allowed to leave, guys. You're not allowed to leave anywhere. You can't go to a different state. You can't go to a different province. You can't go to a different country unless you got the mark. Unless you become the traveling man, unless you become the Jesuit, the Acta Latimorum, the great finished work, the apotheosis of man becoming Satan. All right? They would not permit them to even leave the reductions without permission or to receive any impressions except those emanating from themselves, or to do anything not dictated by them. People don't do anything unless it's dictated by the Roman censors, by the Roman high priests. The result was what they designed, that the Indians came to look upon all Europeans, whether ecclesiastic or lay, as enemies. Everyone thinks the government is the enemy, guys. Really, the government's the enemy. And that's why you will be destroyed by the Jesuits. Because you want to overthrow the government. You don't get it. You don't. If you think the government's your enemy, you have no idea. The result was what they designed. That the Indians came to look upon all Europeans, whether ecclesiastic or lay, as enemies, and the Jesuit as their only friends. Okay? They readily engaged, therefore, in the manufacture of arms and ammunition and submitted to military discipline until they became a formidable army. Subject, of course, to the command of their Jesuit superiors. The sequel of Jesuit history proves that in all this, they were unconsciously creating an antagonism, which, in the end, overwhelmed them. A violent feud sprang up between the Jesuits and the Franciscan monks, which undoubtedly arose out of the claim of superiority and exclusiveness set up and persisted, in which the former, it may be by the former. It may be well inferred that the Jesuits were chiefly to blame for this feud, for the reason that the Franciscans retained the confidence of the church authorities and the Jesuits did not. At all events, however, they were in open enmity with each other and prosecuted their controversy with an exceeding degree of bitterness upon both sides. Where's the Franciscan Pope? Oh yeah, that's right. Pope Clement XIV was a Franciscan monk before he became Pope. What happened to him? He was assassinated by the Jesuits. Rotted from the inside out like goo. They couldn't even put him out in display because his body was so gone. And now we have a Jesuit Pope. At all events, however, they were in open enmity with each other and persecuted the controversy with an exceeding degree of bitterness upon both sides. A distinguished citizen of the United States who represented the country as minister to Paraguay, alluding to this fact, says, quote, the Franciscan priests in the capital regarded them, the Jesuits, with envy, suspicion, and jealousy. These last fomented the animosity of the people against them, so that the government, priests, and people regarded with favor, rather than otherwise, the destruction of the missions and the expulsion of their founders, end quote. Notwithstanding these hostile relations, however, between the Jesuits and the Franciscans, and the distributed condition of affairs existing between the former and the Portuguese authorities, neither the Pope nor the King of Spain withdrew their patronage entirely from the Jesuits for some years, because they got them in Spain too. They're everywhere, man, whispering in the weird ears like Satan would, you know? And not until it was made manifest that they had become an independent power, which might, if not checked, result in complications injurious alike to the church and the state. But the time arrived after a while when it became necessary to impose severe restraints upon their ambition and to teach them that neither the powers of church nor state were concentrated in their hands. They were required to learn what they had seemed not before to have been conscious of, that the authority they exercised in Paraguay was usurped, and that if they desired to continue there as a society, they must submit to be held in proper subordination. Being unable or unwilling to realize this, they invited results which they manifestly had not anticipated. And this gets into the whole papal suppression of the Jesuits, because this was one of the blocks of the tower of the Jesuits that resulted in them being universally suppressed by the Pope, 1773. So, whether it was on purpose or not, I believe it was on purpose. This was one of the Jesuit reductions were one of the main things that made it happen. When the protected controversy between Spain and Portugal about the boundaries of their respective possessions in South America reached an adjustment, it furnished an occasion for testing the obedience of the Jesuits to royal authority. The two governments, after the usual delay in such matters, came to an admissible understanding and arranged the boundaries to their mutual satisfaction. It placed a portion of the Jesuit missions under the jurisdiction of the Portuguese, which they had supposed to belong to Spain. They had supposed to belong to Spain, but they weren't. The Jesuits refused to submit to this and inaugurated the necessary measures to resist it, being determined if they could prevent it. So, did the Jesuits resist it, or did the whole population resist it? Because why would you ever think it was the Jesuits who resisted it? When the government says we're getting rid of all the evil in the country and the people resist it, is it the people resisting, or is it the Jesuits? It's the Jesuits. So if it's the Jesuits resisting it, then why are you blaming it on the people? Stop blaming it on the people, guys. Stop blaming it on the government. Start blaming it on the people you're worshiping, actually. The Jesuits. The Jesuits refused. Oh, sorry. It placed a portion of the Jesuit missions under the... So the Jesuits refused to submit to this and inaugurated the necessary measures to resist it, being determined, if they could prevent it, not to submit to the dominion of Portugal. Their preference with Spain was because of the fact that the king of that country was more favorably inclined to them than the Portuguese king. But the history of the controversy justifies the belief that they would not even have submitted to the former unresistingly, inasmuch as it had undoubtedly become their fixed purpose to retain the independence they had long labored to establish by maintaining their theocratic form of government. They had been so accustomed to autocratic rule over the natives that they could not become reconciled to the idea of surrendering it to any earthly power. In this instance, however, they encountered an adversary of whose courage and capacity they had not the least conception, and whom they found in a brief period capable of inflicting a death blow upon the society. This was Sebastian Cavallo, Marquis of Pombal, who was the chief counselor of the Portuguese king. All right, and he is part of the society that's supposed to be the honorary Templars of Spain. Now, the Grand Master of this guy's order was King Philip I, not while he was alive, but the Grand Master of this order is the King of Spain. And King Philip I of Spain, who was a slave of the Black Pope, Francis Borgia, Francis Borgia, he said and he was the Grand Master of this whatever it's called, the Order of Caltravera, Santiago, Alcantara, Montesa. He said, and the Supreme Order of Christ, he said, out of all of the religious orders, that of the Jesuits is the one in the least bit that I can comprehend. which means to understand. So a guy from this order later on, 200, 300 years later, helped to suppress the Jesuits. But did he do it on purpose? Did he not do it on purpose? You be the judge. So Cavallo, better known as Pombal, and the King of Portugal were both faithful members of the Roman Church and conducted the government in obedience to its requirements. But neither of them was disposed to submit to the dictation of the Jesuits of Paraguay with regard to the question of boundary, which was entirely political, or submit to their rebellion against legitimate authority. So, like, you know, this is a guy from inside the Catholic Church. How are the Jesuits going to be destroyed from the inside? Not from the outside, from the inside out. Just like Luther, you know. So that's how it'll happen again. Or that's how at least it'll start to collapse. So we'll read the rest of this. There's only one page left. And then we'll get into some other stuff. So, okay. It presented a vital issue, such a question did not admit of compromise or equivocation. It presented a vital issue they could neither avoid nor postpone without endangering the government and forfeiting their own self-respect. Consequently, they inaugurated prompt and energetic measures to suppress the threatened insurrection of the Jesuits before it should be permitted to ripen into open and armed resistance. From that time forward, the controversy constantly increased in violence. The intense hatred of Pombal by the Jesuits has colored their opinions to such an extent that they deny to him either talents or merit, and inasmuch as they charge all the ensuing results to him, he is pictured by them more as a monster of iniquity than as a statesman of acknowledged ability. All this, however, should count for nothing in deciding the real merits of the controversy. The whole matter is resolved into the simple proposition that it was the duty of the government to vindicate and maintain its own authority in the face of Jesuit opposition. It had nothing to do with the church, nor the church with it. It did not involve any question of faith, but was confined solely and entirely to secular and temporal affairs. And if under these circumstances Pombal had quietly permitted the Jesuits to defy the government and consummate their object by successful rebellion against its authority, he would have won from the Jesuit pens the brightest and most glowing praise, but his name would have gone into history as the betrayer of his country. So, it was the government that helped destroy the Jesuits. Yet the whole world hates the government. You guys think you're going to destroy the Jesuits a little like us? It's, you know, it's people that are within the system that are going to have to do it. We can spiritually destroy it. But if you want your land to be returned, you got to first repent. And then, you know, I shall heal your land, you know? That's what Yao says. With the foregoing facts impressed upon his mind, the reader will be prepared to appreciate the subsequent events which led to the expulsion of the Jesuits from the Roman Catholic nations of Europe, and finally to the suppression and abolition of the society as the only means of defense against its exactions and enormities. So Marcus de Pombal, he didn't disagree with the Jesuits' religion. He just disagreed with them, with their political, temporal, physical religion, not their spiritual religion. So that's a key fact. The government may not agree with the Jesuits' religion or political, temporal, material government, but they definitely agree with their religion. All right, so now let's read some other stuff. So check out this. We're going to get some more context. I'm going to zoom in. Saint Simon, so this is from Joseph McCabe's A Canon History of the Jesuits, page 269, 270. And I'll link all of this in the video after. It says, Saint Simon tells us that on one occasion, a ship from South America discharged at the quays of Candy several boxes addressed to the, quote, Procurator General of the Society of Jesus. Now, this is important when we come later, okay, guys? The contents were said to be chocolate, but the weight was extraordinary, and the officials decided to open one of the boxes. It was, apparently, full of bars of chocolate, but the weight of each was so mysterious that they were more closely examined. They were bars of solid gold, thickly coated with chocolate. This incident probably gave support to the rumor in Spain that the Jesuits had hidden gold mines in their carefully guarded reductions. But we may more probably recognize the direction taken by the great prophet on the reductions and the reason for the determined efforts of the Jesuit authorities to support their fathers in this uncanonical industry. They made billions, guys. Hundreds of billions of dollars would have been what they made in these communes. All right. I'll link this too. So, in James Atkin Wiley's book, The Rise, Progress, and Insidious Workings of Jesuitism, page 100, London, 1870, he says, having secured the territory of Paraguay, a Portuguese possession in South America, the Jesuits founded a kingdom there and became its sovereigns. They treated the natives at first with kindness and taught them several useful arts. But by and by, they changed their policy and, reducing them to slavery, compelled them to labor for their benefit, dealing out to the Paraguayan peasant from the produce of his own toil as much as would suffice to feed and clothe him. The fathers laid up the rest in large storehouses, which they had erected for the purpose. The factory. What do you think about when you think of modern communism in the last 50, 100 years? Think about the factory. Think about the commune, right? The Soviet Union, the big factory. China, the big factory of the world, right? Everything's made in China. And everyone gets paid the same. And it's nothing. You get paid pennies and shekels and, nothing. Minimum wage, universal healthcare, universal education, universal income. All these things that the Jesuit Pope has been calling for, that the Pope and the Jesuits have been calling for decades. I mean, they've been calling for it since forever. This is all going back to Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica at the Second Lateran Council, where he said, you have no property. Everything you own is the Pope's. All right? And the Jesuits took that and Machiavellialized it and put it into fascist communism, and they made it ultramontanism, and they said, this is liberation theology. This is social justice. This is solidarity. Yeah. This is communism. Yeah. This is socialism. So, they kept care. Where are we? Oh, yeah. Okay. Dealing out to the Paraguayan peasant from the produce of his own toil was as much as would suffice to feed and clothe him. The fathers laid up the rest in large storehouses, which they had erected for their purpose. They kept care fully concealed from the knowledge of Europe, this seemingly exhaustless source of wealth, that no one else might share its sweets. They continued all the while to draw from it those vast sums they carried out on their machinations in the old world. With the gold wrung from the Paraguayan peasants' toil, they hired spies, bribed courtiers, so lobbyists, right? The CIA, and then we got the lobbyists, opened new missions, alphabet agencies, and maintained the pomp and splendor of their establishments by which the populace was dazzled. Hypnotized. The father of hypnotism, Franz von Murmer, educated by the Jesuits. Stop watching TV. Get off your phones. Stop watching movies. Stop listening to mainstream music, mainstream everything. It's all black Jesuit magic. It's all Ignatian spiritual exercises. And if you can't see this, or if you can only halfway see it, then you're under it. That's the whole point. So, this is, that was from, we'll link that later too, okay? Now, check this. This is what the Holy Roman Emperor said. The Holy Roman Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, established by Pepin the Elder, with the donation of Pepin and the contract, blood oath of Charlemagne the Great in the Carolingian dynasty, that's saying, I will protect you forever and your spiritual power with the temporal power in forever if you make me Holy Roman Emperor. And the Pope said, you can be Holy Roman Emperor forever in all your dynasties and all your kings after you, as long as you worship the Pope and its kingdom forever. Okay, so that's who the Holy Roman Emperor. He is the emperor of the temporal power that protects the spiritual power. And there is no spiritual power. There is no temporal power, rather, without the spiritual power. That's what Pope Boniface the Seventh said. So check this. This is what he says. I know these men. I know these men as well as anyone can do. All the schemes they have carried on and the pains they have taken to spread darkness over the earth, as well as their efforts to rule and embroil Europe from Cape Finisterre to Spitzbergen. In China, they were mandarins. In France, academicians, courtiers, and confessors. In Spain and Portugal, grandees. And in Paraguay, kings. Had not my granduncle Joseph I became emperor, we had in all probability seen in Germany too, a Malagrida or an Alvieros. Check out those. And this is him writing to Etienne Francois, Prime Minister of King Louis the 15th. And you can find this in Leopold von Ranke's History of the Popes, Volume 2, Section 7, London, 1913, or in James Atkin Wiley's The Rise and Progress of Insidious Workings of Jesuitism, page like 87 or something, London, 1870. So, check out this. This is from a Jesuit. The great defender of the Jesuits. They have many historians. They're all defending they're putting out their rebuttals and their refutations of the history of the Jesuits, right? But there's certain things they cannot deny. They're just like, yeah, well, it's true. But, they don't care. Quote, he says this. This is from Jesuit Alfred Weld S.J.'s The Suppression of the Society of Jesus in the Portuguese Dominions, page 96 to 97, London, 1877. Try and find this book, guys. You can't. This is censored on the internet. You can't find this book anywhere. I tried. Maybe you can try it. Maybe you can find it in a library. I can't find it on the internet. You can find it quoted in other books, though, but you can't find the original quote. So check this. And this is an English Jesuit. He went to Stonyhurst, where Tolkien went. Okay, so he says this, that they had under them 31 great populations producing immense riches to the society, while the people themselves were kept in the most miserable slavery, that no Spaniard or Portuguese were he even governor or bishop was ever admitted into the reductions. That, quote, with strange deceit, end quote, the Spanish language was absolutely forbidden. That the Indians were trained to an unlimited blind obedience, kept in the most, quote, extraordinary ignorance and the most insufferable slavery ever known, and under a complete despotism as to body and soul, that they did not know there was any other sovereign in the world than the fathers, and knew nothing of the king or any other law than the will of the holy fathers. Sound like today? Sound like the youth today? They know nothing of the government. They know nothing of the king. They know nothing of it. They only know the will of the Jesuits. That the Indians were taught that white laymen adored gold, had a devil in their bodies, were the enemies of the Indians, and of the images which they adored, that they would destroy their altars and offer sacrifices of their women and infants, and they were consequently taught to kill white men wherever they could find them, and to be careful to cut off their heads lest they should come to life again. Guys, think about it today. Everyone hates white people. Not everyone, but you know what I'm saying? It's two sides of the same coin, guys. It's not about white or black. It's not about up or down, left or right, red and blue, 1 and 2. It's about an infinite amount of possibilities and situations and occurrences, and everything is so nuanced, and you gotta judge with right measures and weights. Every individual thing is different. Every individual person is different. Every individual occurrence is different, right? And if you were to judge without all that in mind, without the Torah, without the first 5 books of the Bible, which Yahusha reveals to us, then according to Proverbs, it's an abomination. It's an abomination to deal with false weights and measures. Okay? Look at how they've turned the black man against the white man and the white man against the black man. If you fall into any of those categories, you're an idiot. It's about loving your neighbor as yourself. That's the greatest commandment. All right? Okay, so check out this. This is from Jesuit Francisco de Miranda, 17th century Spanish Jesuit, guys. He was the provincial of the Jesuit province of Paraguay at the time. At the time this was all going down, okay? He was the provincial he was the head. He's like the superior general of it, right? And he became the Jesuit assistant to Jesuit Superior General Franz Retz, SJ, later on. Okay, guys? Now, this is quoted in ex-Jesuit Paul Graf von Hosenbroek's 14 Years of Jesuit, Volume 2, page 6, London, 1911. He says this. This is what the Jesuit Francisco de Miranda says, the head of the Jesuit reductions in Paraguay says. He says, quote, "Until I came here to Rome, where I first obtained accurate information about everything, I did not comprehend what our society was. Its government is a special study which not even the provincials understand. Only one who fills the office which I now occupy can even begin to understand it." End quote. Now, this is from Andrew Sinclair's. We're going to bring it a little back to now. You know, this is from Andrew Sinclair, The Great Silence Conspiracy, a fully documented exposure of Roman Masonry and fascism. Page 16, New York, 1980. Quote, "By every account, the condition of the natives of Paraguay is pitiful. It was in Paraguay that the Jesuits founded their notorious servile state. For the last 25 years, Paraguay has been ruled by the brutal Roman Catholic dictator, the son of a Bavarian immigrant, Alfredo Stroessner, and Paraguay became perhaps the haven for German Nazis, Chilean terrorists, and Roman Catholic, Croatian, and Italian fascists, Ustashi. Why does the United Nations and all the quote-unquote human rights people turn a blind eye to what is going on in Paraguay? No prizes for the correct answer first time. It will be remembered that Eichmann was admitted to Roman Catholic Argentine with a Vatican passport." Insane. Now we're going to read the most important, guys, and this is going to be the last thing I'm going to say. This is going to be the last thing I'm going to say, guys. And please like the video, guys. I mean, unless you don't like it. But please like the video. Got lots of viewers. And comment. Share it. Subscribe, turn on the bell notification, all that stuff. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I know I'm not reading the chat. I'm trying to keep it short, you know. But this is the last thing I'm going to read, okay, guys? I hope you can see what I'm saying. Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so this is the last thing I'll say, guys. This is the Jesuit president, which is a super high up, fourth vow Jesuit. Okay, we don't know his name, but at the time, he was the Jesuit president of the Jesuit novitiate of the Jesuit Church, Sant Antonio Abate in Chieri, Italy, 1825. Okay, this meeting where he says this quote was attended by the highest officials of the Jesuit order at the time, including the 2 Jesuit superior generals and multiple European Jesuit provincials, vice provincials, regional assistants, and Jesuit institutional presidents and rectors. This was overheard and written down by the pen of ex-Jesuit Jacopo Leonese, S.J., in his book, The Jesuit Conspiracy, The Secret Plan of the Order, page 80 to 82, London, 1848, which I read on my website. Absolutely incredible book. Suspenseful. So he says this. This is the last thing I'm going to say, guys, and then I'm going to end it. Think about this today. Think about this where you live. Your situation. Think about this is Arturo Sosa. He's from South America. And he said, COVID-19 is the end of democracy. Go look it up on Rome Reports. Okay? It says this. Quote, "Dear brethren, our weapons are of quite a different temper from those of the Caesars of all ages, and it will not be difficult for us so to maneuver as to render ourselves masters of all the powers already so much weakened." Look around us today. We need fear no lack of soldiers, because we have everyone. We have all the populations. Only let us apply ourselves to recruiting them from all ranks and from all nations and drilling them into punctual service. But let us, at the same time, be vigilant that no one suspect our designs. So that's what he says. Be vigilant that no one suspect our designs. Guys, it is a blessing from the Most High, Yahweh Elohim, Yahushua HaMashiach, that we even know this. We should be being overrun by these people. Hallelujah. All glory and praise to Yahweh. Okay? Let everyone be persuaded, whilst consecrating to us his labor, his gold, or his talents, that he is employing them in his own interest. Prideful. I don't worship anyone, man. I'm an atheist. I don't do this. I don't do that. I don't worship Rome. I don't worship Rome. It's the government's fault. It's your fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's Bill Gates' fault. Like, it's not my fault. Pride comes before the fall, right? In his own interest. Ours be the knowledge of this great mystery. As to others, let them hear us speak in parables, so that, having eyes, they may not see, and having ears, they may not hear. Zombies. Let us labor more diligently than all who have undertaken to rise or to raise great hierarchical edifices, and let our labor be in earnest. You well know what we aim at is the empire of the world. But how are we to succeed unless we have everywhere adepts who understand our language, which must yet remain unknown to others? Doubtless, you have not forgotten our ancient Paraguay. It was but a very limited trial of our system in a small corner of the globe, the Roman Catholic globe. In these latter days, we need a new code. SPQR COVID 19. We who have undertaken to work so mighty a change to make everything bend beneath the irresistible hammer of our doctrines, so that all shall become as stone, iron, gold, and adamant for the gigantic building, commune, reduction, internet, electricity, into which we will force all men to enter. Let every individual, therefore, yield up in entire obedience. Let him plight inviolable vows in one sole convent, and let the Pope, but a Pope of our own forming, be its perpetual abbot, Pope Francis. No, Catholicism must no longer remain a mutilated power. Has it not within itself means insurmountable to overthrow and to raise up? Can it not re-erect itself, conquer, destroy, rebuild, and so Machiavellize itself that the world can by no means escape it? Let us hasten our work before the people become enlightened. Oh, we're enlightened. We guard the commandments of Yahweh and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. Let's go, buddy. As long as they remain opaque and material, we can make of them an instrument of conquest. But do you not perceive how information is already spreading? Oh, it's spreading, buddy. It's spreading. Woe to us if so many noble countries do not soon become our conquest, and if millions of men, robust and ignorant, lend us not their Herculean arms to extinguish. Hercules, he was a demigod, half man, half god. A Nephilim. Lend us their Herculean arms, their transhumanism arms. Left hand. Actions and thoughts that please the horror. Transhumanism. 2. Extinguish the malign star which threatens us. How allegorical, legomanistic, Gnostic. Very, very Gnostic. which threatens us. But the more of the Jesuits' time we lose, the more problematic does our success become. And one of the Jesuits says, Satan is time. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It's the 11th hour, Rome. Time's up. All right, guys. I'm going to end it there. I wish I could read the chat, but I'll read it after. And I'm going to link all of this in... I'll pin it as a top comment. All the books I read. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back on Wednesday at 9 a.m. just like always. And I'm reading a new book right now. It's going to be an hour long at a time, so it's not going to be 2 hours. So please come and tune in for that. It's a crazy book. You should all need to hear it. And yeah, guys, so think about it. Think about it, what it is for you as an individual following the divine breath, right? The Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Are we blaming the government? Are we blaming this and that, this institution, that institution, Rome, this, that, blah, blah, blah? Look at my website, man. I say, they came, they saw, they conquered, we wondered, we wandered, we died, right? Because we were given over to this. This is the judgment. Rome is the judgment. If you do not accept the judgment, he says this. Yahweh says, if you do not accept your judgment and repent, I will not return. I will not return. So if he doesn't return for you, maybe you didn't repent. Maybe you blamed it on everyone and everything else. Stop blaming systemic things. Start blaming yourself and start repenting. All right, guys. I'm going to end it there. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And go home, read your Bible.